Hello, and welcome to Just Three Workplace Gurus, a podcast about the real world of work. I'm Vivienne.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Mike.
Today we have a wonderful guest, Shannon Arens from Sequoia. And I have known Shannon and her team for many, many years now, and we enjoy a wonderful partnership providing well-being and various services to Sequoia clients, ergonomics, well-being, et cetera, et cetera. But Shannon, when we talked recently, had mentioned that Sequoia, which they do every year, I believe, puts out a well-being trend survey, compile the answers, and then publish a report of what the findings are. So this past February, which is not all that long ago, Sequoia has published this well-being trends report. And Shannon, thank you so much for joining us to kind of give us insights in what you found. So if you don't mind, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for a minute. If you can tell us a little bit about you, your mission, what Sequoia is doing, and then about the trends report, that would be great. And then we'll dig in.
Yes, thank you, Vivienne, and thank you to the three of you for having me here today. My name is Shannon Arens. I'm the Director of Wellbeing at Sequoia. And for those who don't know, Sequoia is a compensation and benefits advisory firm. So we help a lot of growing tech companies manage their well-being benefits, their healthcare spend, as well as their compensation, all in the name of taking care of employees. And on the well-being side of the house, we really help our clients build a holistic well-being strategy. So that's why we've enjoyed a really nice partnership with PB Ergonomics, as well as many other solutions in this space. Our job is to really vet all of those solutions and bring them to the forefront for our clients and help them choose the best ones that are going to really meet the needs of their employees. And today what we're talking about is our Wellbeing Trends report, which is something that we publish every year that you alluded to, Vivienne. And it really helps set the stage for our clients in a time when they are planning their strategy and thinking about what they're going to do for the.
All right. So we're dying to hear what you found out.
Yeah. So typically every year we really we take the findings and distill it down to a few key insights. And this year we found 4. And I think really the takeaway is that we are moving into a more disciplined phase of well-being strategy in 2026. I think if we think about the last 5-6 years or so, there was really sort of this expansion of well-being, mostly driven by the pandemic, remote work, and really thinking about how to manage employee well-being in a very unknown time. And so we saw a lot of employers, rush to implement, rush to expand, but we're shifting a little bit here, and we're thinking about how we can be more intentional with what employers have invested in, what is the return here, and what are the outcomes that they're really hoping to get, and are they seeing those? And so we found 4 major trends, and I think we'll dive into each of them. But the first is related to well-being program decision-making after a pretty tough medical renewal year. Then we also looked into GLP-1 coverage, which is a very hot topic amongst many employers, and sort of what are employers covering? Are they covering it? What are some of the strategies they're doing to manage that? The third being mental health, which is a very important line item and benefit strategy for employers. But we're sort of looking a little bit more about, are employers getting that return on their mental health investment? And then finally, the last trend is AI and well-being, and how are employers approaching integrating AI into their well-being and their benefits.
Very interesting. All right, so let's delve into the first finding.
Yeah, so the first one has to do with well-being program decision-making and what did employers do after a tough medical renewal year. And so to sort of set the stage for that, the 2026 medical renewal year was probably the toughest medical renewal year that many of us in the industry have seen, probably in our careers. But what we looked at from our perspective is, and what we found is that employers didn't gut well-being programs in response, which is really great to see. And it tells us a little bit about how essential these programs have become. And so a couple of data points that might be helpful here is that over 75% of employers responding to our survey experienced a medical increase over 6%, with most of them in that 6 to 10% range on that medical renewal. And despite this, 68% made no changes to their well-being programs. So they didn't cut any existing well-being programs, but they also weren't adding. There was a lot of, keeping steady.
Status
and then
quo.
we did, exactly, yeah.
Interesting. Can I interrupt you for a second? Can you just explain a little bit why you said it was one of the toughest years? I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Because of the medical increase. So when employers are looking at their health plans for the following year,
yes,
and that's a lot of that's driven by high cost claimants, more utilization of the medical plan.
Okay. What was the percentage of that increase overall?
Yeah, over 75% had an increase over 6%, with the bulk being in 6 to 10% range.
That's significant. Wow. That's really significant. But what you're finding is that despite that, companies held steady.
Companies held steady on their well-being programs, which was really great to see.
Yeah.
And I think even more notable too is that we found that 22% of employers actually added programs without cutting any. So even under this big financial pressure, they're still considering and exploring and adding well-being. Yeah. So it's really sort of a big signal that, well-being has moved from this sort of optional kind of perk category.
Like nice to have as opposed to I have to have. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's becoming really the strategic infrastructure.
Interesting. And I do think COVID had a lot to do with that. COVID had a zillion, obviously, of COVID. Right. But I think one of the things, maybe if there's a silver lining, is that the well-being emerged into the status because people really fell apart. And I think companies realized, wait a minute, if people aren't functioning, that's terrible business, So from a human standpoint, I think a lot more compassion, empathy. And I think more people than before, this is at least what we're finding, is that on the business side of the house, it also made sense. More sense than ever. So that's just me. So it sounds like your findings are supporting that.
And I have a question. Are you finding that increase in more of that is because they're trying to be more preventative to keep those premiums down or their costs down? So it's like almost pay up front to do some of the other things you mentioned, mental health, GLP-1s, all of that is more preventative, right? To help keep their premiums down. Is that the intention?
Yeah, I think employers are looking to well-being solutions to, I think, one, manage costs, like you're alluding to, Amy. So really thinking about how can these solutions help prevent larger costs down the road when employees are more in crisis, whether it's mental health or more sort of chronic conditions. And so how can well-being solutions really help prevent that and treat it now before costs get more? And then I think there's also a retention lever when it comes to these well-being solutions as well. And so employees at really big tech companies, we work with smaller tech companies, but they're recruiting from these really big employers. Exactly. And so these benefits can really help with that recruiting and retention. And at the end of the day, productivity as well. So again, it all comes down to sort of how can well-being help affect the bottom line for employers?
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Maybe you can or can't answer this. Maybe I know we're going to get into some more of these facets for the other buckets of responses you got. But in general, what do you see as employees' well-being programs? What do they consist of?
Yeah, so we at Sequoia, we help our clients think about well-being from 4 pillars: physical, emotional, financial, and family. And that's sort of how we frame holistic well-being, at least when it comes to well-being benefits. And so we're seeing employers look at, at least from the physical pillar, fitness programs, of course, but also MSK solutions, musculoskeletal solutions, which is a big line item for a lot of employers when it comes to those claims, as well as primary care, preventive care types of solutions. In emotional, it's access to mental health, access to therapists, which, on a national scale, it can take a long time to get in touch with a therapist, but a lot of the solutions are lowering that access to a couple days even. On the family side, it's fertility solutions. How do we help employees grow their families? How do we help existing families take care of their kiddos while they're also trying to work?
Right.
And then finally, on the financial side, it's saving. How do employees buy a house in this economy? And what are some of the levers pulling for that?
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And I love that total approach, because it is all of those things, right? And within each bucket, there's a whole world of things to offer and explore. So anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's the first trend we found. Any other questions about that first trend? I'm happy to move on to the next one.
No, I think you covered it great.
Cool. Yeah. So, and then our report dug into a second finding, and this is related to GLP-1 coverage. And so I think for many, at least those of you on this call and probably many others, you really can't do much without hearing about GLP-1s, whether you're scrolling social media or watching TV, whatever it might be, GLP-1s are front and center. And so this is then...
Can you define it for anybody who doesn't know what that is?
Yeah, so a GLP-1, I should say, GLP-1s have existed for a very long time to treat diabetes. And so now there's been, at least in the last 3-4 years, growing awareness of their use case for weight loss. So less for the diagnostic condition of diabetes, but how can GLP-1s for weight loss be effective? And they've been proven to be very effective. And because now that they're sort of more mainstream and can reach more employees, employers are now having to think about it because they're hearing about the demand. And so what we're finding and what we're hearing a lot about is, should employers cover this for weight loss? They've always covered it for diabetes. There's quite a bit of regulation around that. But now how do they cover it for weight loss? And it becomes a very expensive endeavor to cover it. And what we found in our report this year is that, especially compared to last year, is that there wasn't an overwhelming increase in the amount of employers who are covering it for weight loss, despite the growing demand. So we found that 25% of employers are covering GLP-1s for weight loss. And this coverage increases as the company gets larger. So for large employers over 1,000 employees, nearly half of them are covering it for weight loss.
Really?
So that really, that signals that it's more of a benefits maturity decision. So as an employer becomes more mature, maybe they're self-insured, they're likely seeing that coverage makes sense for them. But what we did find this year is there much more focus and deliberate intention to manage the costs of GLP-1s with guardrails. And this can get in the weeds of sort of the benefits coverage strategy, but prior authorization, what are the criteria needed to be able to be prescribed a GLP-1 for weight loss? Adding in some more of this cost share to help, so the employee carries some of the financial burden as well as the employer. And so more of those strategies are starting to come into play now.
So I have a question. I think this is really brilliant, actually, because diabetes is one component, but obviously the benefits are so far reaching into other medical elements and well-being, et cetera, et cetera. I'm assuming this is still doctor prescribed and doctor managed, but are you saying that the employer is going to now just cover the cost of that? Or is it because it's not covered under medical insurance? Or can you help us understand what employers are up against with this and why they have to step in to even consider coverage?
Yeah, I will speak at it from my awareness as a well-being person. We have very smart people at Sequoia on the pharmacy side of the house who can better answer these questions. But to answer your question from where I sit, yes, so employers can, as they're designing their pharmacy plans, they
Okay.
can decide whether they want to cover GLP-1s for weight loss or not. If they do want to cover it, they can then put in some guardrails to make sure, not the entire population now has access to GLP-1s, even if they are of normal and healthy weight. And so if they could lower the sort of, their FDA has some criteria that, a certain BMI, at that BMI, then they can be prescribed GLP-1s for weight loss.
Okay.
Or let's put in some cost share. So, we're going to have the employee have a copay in order to have access to these versus, completely covered. And so some of these guardrails help manage the cost for employers, but yes, and also doctors do need to be the ones prescribing these.
Okay. Now, the reason I ask is I went to a health fair at a large tech company last year in New York City, and vaccine programs are a very common benefit, right? But it's some contracted medical group coming in, not your doctor giving you the vaccine. So it's not that different than going to CVS or getting Walgreens to get your vaccine. But they didn't, the physical dispensing of the vaccine was done on the work site premise. So I was just curious if this was anything like that, but it sounds like no. The doctor is still.
We're not seeing that yet. And also, I think there also is still some stigma related to, weight loss and whether an employee, even though it's talked about a lot, there are still a lot of people who may be taking a GLP-1 and not want to talk about it. And so I think there's, a level of privacy. I think what is great about this is that it is being, overweight and obesity is being talked about more now to help lower that stigma in the same way that mental health was on that track, or even infertility was on that track of just destigmatizing it, making this more of a open conversation.
And the health issue. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So, right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's our second trend on GLP-1s. And then our third one is related to mental health. And this is personally one of my favorite chapters of the report. As a previous mental health therapist, I am always loving how much employers are focusing on mental health. And what we found is that what didn't change is that employers do continue to care deeply about mental health and investing in it. But what is changing is they're starting to look at it in a more scrutinized, strategic way. So again, kind of going back to that pandemic era, we saw so many employers invest in a mental health solution to help address, all of the challenges that employees were facing. And so it's almost table stakes now to have a mental health solution at an organization. But what we found, and we asked this question outright, do you feel that employee mental health has improved at your organization in the last year? And we found that 70% of employers are unsure.
Unsure.
Unsure. Yes.
Interesting. I wasn't expecting you to say that. Okay.
Yeah.
They're unsure if it helped. Huh.
Exactly. And so, that tells us that they're implementing these solutions, but they don't know, are employees actually getting better as a result of this huge investment? These are not, low cost solutions. They come with a hefty price tag. And when we dug into that a little deeper, we then looked at what are they measuring? Is there any metrics that they're measuring to kind of help them understand if employees are getting better? And what we found is that the majority of employers are looking at utilization only. So that's enrollment in the benefit, and then maybe single touch points. And so that tells us utilization doesn't necessarily lead to improvement, or at least not confidence in improvement. And actually, might be very interesting for the three of you, we actually found that a very large chunk of employers are measuring nothing when it comes to their mental health solutions. So they're
just putting programs out there, and that's that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm wondering, Shannon, how much of that has to do with the stigma of any kind of mental health challenge or fear of getting I don't want to say too involved, but asking too much information of the employee. In other words, do we get into any kind of HIPAA challenges if we start asking too many questions?
Yeah.
Um, because I think of all the benefits that we use, having been an employee in large companies for a long time. That's probably one we don't want to talk about. Oh, I've been going to a therapist. Thank you. I don't know that people are doing. I understand, but I wonder if your take is that is one of the elements of it.
So if an employer is offering a mental health solution, whether that's like, digital access to online learning modules, as well as virtual access to therapists and coaches, that vendor is able to provide aggregated reporting. And so that the employer doesn't have to ask those questions directly out to an employee. That said, what we find is that when employers do roll out sort of employee well-being surveys, engagement surveys, just to their population, we are actually not seeing them ask those types of questions. They're asking about how engaged do they feel at work, or how do they feel about how their manager's doing. All very important questions, but they're not asking. They're not asking like, how was your mental health today? How was it yesterday? What would be helpful for you in the future? And I think that would be really
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I mean, I know even on the ergonomics realm, some employees are, I don't say afraid, they're concerned. That's probably a better word, to open up Pandora's box, right? Yet,
Yep.
I think the people who really are proactive will say things like, are there any areas of improvement that we could address for you? Are you physically comfortable? Are you, whatever the set of questions are. And there's a way to phrase it, I think, that feels less, I guess, scary, put that way, for the employee, right? Anyway, so I would imagine this is even more touchy in that sense. But I wonder if questions couldn't even be asked, like, of the services offered, have you found them beneficial? Yes, no. Like, maybe the more general ways to ask to even get some metrics. But I'm surprised when you said so many said unsure and so many don't even touch it.
Yeah.
Yet they offer, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think, Amy, or Vivienne, you're right about the Pandora's box. Do you want to know? It's like asking them, are you feeling like you're burnt out? Like, nobody wants to know that.
But yet it's such an important question to ask.
It's a huge.
There's so many
totally
concrete
agree.
things you can do to help that, and everybody.
And you don't want to find that out after the fact, the day that they walk out of the building because they're exhausted. That's not a solution. It's interesting.
Very interesting, huh? And yet, and then the big question is who's responsible for this. But there's a lot that the onus is on the individual to take care of themselves. As an employer, I think we're preaching to the choir here. It's very smart, if not essential, to offer these things, because the better your people are doing, the better. Interesting. So what do you make of that? Those responses, Shannon? And like, what would you encourage employers to do?
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway we were able to glean and sort of leave as an insight is thinking about taking a step back. Doesn't mean we need to add. Employers don't need to rush to add a bunch of programs. Take a look at what your programs have, like what you have right now, and what's the reporting available to you, and how can you look at it in a more meaningful way. So clinical improvement. A lot of these solutions are also assessing the member on their depression and anxiety symptoms. And how is this solution making sure that those symptoms, upon utilizing the services, are going down? And those are really where like well-being improves, and you can move the needle on that. Also, any claims movement. When you implement a solution like this, you should be able to sort of draw a line to say, we've implemented this solution. They're getting faster access to care. Our outpatient mental health claims should go down. And that sort of then leaves sort of more a referral pathway for more of the higher needs of the inpatient services, which would then maybe then fall in the medical plan still. But I think the takeaway to be like, take a look at the data you have available to you better. And I think knowing that will then lead to greater confidence that, or, an action plan. Like, we're not seeing the outcomes we want. Like, should we promote this benefit more? Maybe this solution's not the one for us.
Yeah. That's true too. And maybe fostering an environment to say that this is private and this is, something that removes that barrier. If somebody's subconscious or they don't want, I don't want my employee to know I'm having a crisis right now. I'm afraid that I'll look weak or I'll look whatever, which is not true. But I think that can be in both directions barrier.
Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about, and I would love to hear each of your thoughts on this, is, sometimes mental health, actually many times mental health is not, I need to go see a therapist. There's so many more low level, more subclinical experiences that employees are going through every day, whether it be AI pressure, which we'll talk a little about next. Where it's telling me to use AI, I don't know how to use it. Or there's layoffs happening all around me. What, like, am I next? Or there's a global crises happening around the world, and that, won't show up in the mental health solution. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I'd love to comment on that, because sometimes our clients at PBE are surprised that we offer stress management training. Like, what does that have to do with ergonomics? I'm like, and ergonomics can also feed into your stress. If you're like going home with eye strain and headaches and your back hurts and your whatever, all the things that poor ergonomics can cause for you, that's going to leave you a little bit miserable and quite stressed out. But stress itself has physical manifestations that are not, you're right, depression, I got to go talk to a therapist, but it can range from muscle tightness to fatigue to brain fog to just like listlessness, or I'm irritable, or all the things that like don't make working your own work or working with others a pleasant experience, And so I think that redefining maybe mental health and talk about, and maybe folding in the stress piece, I think is smart on the part of the employer, because that ranges from burnout to, like you said, every time I turn on the news, I want to collapse, but that affects you at work, right? So I think you just highlighted something really important. It's not necessarily emotional or mental distress, but it's this constant low-level thing that's impeding your well-being that over time accumulates. Sorry.
One area that I think is sort of is stress adjacent that has been helpful to me in the past is coaching. So I have had in periods in the last few years a coach who was sort of the independent third party. Hey, this is my challenge, or I don't feel like I'm communicating well, or whatever it is within the company. How can I better manage my career, my role, which is somewhat therapeutic, but it's also I learned a lot about how I communicate and how I may come to the table in a meeting or whatever. Interestingly enough, Amy and I had a conversation like this yesterday related to a little project that we had worked on, and just a little bit of a conversation about, someone saying, well, here are the things that went wrong and maybe we could do them differently next time. So even that, so to your point, Vivienne, changing the dialogue around mental health, I don't know what we call it, but it is sort of clarity around
emotional well-being. I don't know, but it ties into physical well-being. Like they're kind of enmeshed,
So
they are, because
there's also social well-being.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Yes. There you go.
Right.
And I think there's a lot to be said
at work,
for
there
that.
can be loneliness. There can be I feel isolated. I'm remote. Whatever. I mean, the list goes on and on. So.
And there's even simple things that some companies do where it's a day of giving, and think of how fulfilling that is for people to do, or just a random day off. I've seen some companies do. It's little things like that.
Or no meeting Mondays. I mean, like that makes a difference. Yeah,
they really do. Yeah.
right,
we
well,
need a new top. We need a new category for that, Shannon. You can you work that on?
next year's survey. All right, we'll have a fifth bucket. But anyway, all right, so we'd love to hear about the last bucket, the AI.
Yes. Yes. So
Can't wait
this
for this.
Everybody's
Can't
mind
wait.
these days, yes.
everybody's talking about AI. It's AI and GLP-1s. So the last trend we looked at AI in well-being specifically. So obviously there's so many use cases for AI, but we wanted to know, and we kind of broke it out into two sort of streams. The first is, how are benefits leaders thinking about using AI in well-being and benefits? And then second, how are organizations preparing employees for AI and the potential downstream effects of lack of preparedness on well-being? And so sort of the headline is, obviously AI interest is high, but adoption is still cautious. And that's actually a healthy sign when you think about sort of all of the impacts and consequences of adopting AI too quickly. So we found that only 9% of employers are currently using AI-driven well-being solutions. And that could look like an AI chatbot for navigation. How do I find, this is what I need, and it helps find sort of the level of care that you might need, or find a provider that's in network, whatever it might be, all the way to sort of more, I guess, deeper levels of use cases where the AI chatbot is actually providing care. So, Michael, you mentioned a coach. There's AI coaches out there. There's AI therapists. And so those more deeper levels of care, I think, are we're seeing the most caution. A lot of employers report being interested in AI for efficiency, so reducing that, administrative burden. So obviously a very good use case, but not yet for the personalization of benefits. And then we also found, sort of as a third sort of sub-finding here, many employers do feel leadership pressure to adopt AI. And I think we all know that, huge headlines about it. But a lot of employers are lagging when it comes to training. So they're not really providing that dedicated training for employees on how they should use AI. What does this mean for their job and their role? And how can it enhance it, versus this worry that it's going to take away my job? And so that's really the big things that we found when it comes to AI and well-being. So I think there might be, this will continue to evolve, and especially as a lot of the solutions in the space continue to evolve their technology as well.
That's very interesting. So, I mean, I like the AI tools for your well-being program, whether that's administrative or, you're right, end user benefits, etc. There's somebody that we had on our podcast a few months ago, Joe O'Connor, who's wonderful, who's kind of become like this AI specialist, but his tie-in, his whole big thing is do more and for. And I guess he and his writing partner published a book called Do More and For. And so it's about companies adopting a 4-day work week. And also the adoption of AI ties into that. And his whole premise is, if we're going to adopt AI, let's not fall into the trap of that just means piling on that much more work, which is very interesting, because I think there's confusion around AI. There's the idea of, I can get things done faster. Employers may say, great, then we're going to pile on 100 more things to you because now you're more efficient, which there's an argument for that. But he's also saying maybe we can also reclaim our time because we can get more done in less, and now we can have more balanced lives. That's a very compelling argument also. So anyway, it's going to be very interesting to see how AI plays out with wellness benefits, and I don't just mean the benefits offered, but our well-being or not well-being.
I spoke about this some time ago. May have been the podcast with Joe, but I think the other challenge companies are having is how to use AI tools securely, because I remember in my last employer being told internally, hey, we don't want to use the tool, any tool, whatever it is, to do these things because that's proprietary information, particularly if you work in an HR department, for instance, which I did. We can't share that information in an external tool.
You have to have a private instance. Yeah.
Right. So there are a lot of other challenges, I think, but I love what you said and what you move forward with Vivienne in relation to clarity. Like, we're not giving employees any clarity about what this will mean to them. Just saying, well, now AI's tools can write code, so we're going to fire all of our engineers. Like, this is unrealistic. We've had so many conversations about human connection recently on this podcast, and the value of that. And we're not giving clarity to employees. We're not giving them any sense of well-being. We'll go back to the other topic where this is related, and so we're creating a lot of unintentional fear, I think.
Then there is real fear. I mean, there was that headline this past week. I forgot which AI engine it was, but somebody's father listened to his AI agent instead of his doctor and didn't end well.
Oh,
So there's that element also that we have to guard against. So, over time, we'll see what happens. But anyhow.
Another story that I read this week that is anecdotal and kind of made me laugh. Allbirds is a shoemaker, online shoemaker. Yes, Allbirds. I'm not wearing my Allbirds today.
Allbirds. Okay. Yeah.
And they have decided to. So they were sold. They sold the shoe business to a private equity firm, and now they're going to be an AI tool. Like, what does that mean? Like, what? Are you just going to stop making shoes and start being AI? And their stock went up like 200% on this news. And I thought, this is absurd. We're back to 2008. What are we doing
here? Funny. That's pretty funny. So Shannon, where do you all go with this at Sequoia? I mean, obviously it helps you get this information. Does it affect next year's survey to like add questions in, or do you do the same 4 buckets every year, or just curious what's coming?
No, we don't. The way that so now we'll use this report to help and support our clients through their strategy and decision making for 2027. Believe it or not, we're already thinking about that. Right. And so they'll use this alongside our benchmarking to kind of know where they stand, where their benefits line up, how do they compare to their competitors, to really make informed decisions. And then we'll do this all again next fall. And we create our survey based on, we're not really so much leveraging what we've found in this survey so much as what are some of the decisions employers made this year, what's being talked about,
what's trending,
exactly, like what are the big thought leaders in the space talking about, and then we kind of form our predictions and design the survey from there and validate it.
So was the survey from 2025 going into 2026, was that the most shocking results? When you list the 4 things that you just talked about, it feels like those are all big game changers in the market right now. I'm curious, in the years past, has it always kind of been the same things? Mental health, I think, has been fairly prominent in the last 6 years, but like the AI component of it, the GLP, I feel like those are new, right? This year. Yeah. Are there other things that have kind of been on the list for years and years that fell off?
Yeah, that is a great question. Last year, we talked a little bit more about strategies related to returning to the office, because that was a very hot topic last year. And I think what we found, and that's why we don't hear so much about it as much this year, is that return to office, this more hybrid setup with more days in the office than not, was increasing. Amongst tech employers specifically. And so more employees were going back to the office. So we looked a lot last year, how are employers supporting that transition from a well-being and benefits strategy standpoint. And so we didn't ask that this year because most employers are just back in the office now. It's not a question anymore.
Right. Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're going to have you back next year.
Yeah.
We're going to have to make this a thing, because it shifts. Anyway, exactly. I want to thank you so much. I have one parting question. And when we post this, we'll also put this in the program notes. But if somebody wants to get a hold of this report, is there anywhere that they can go to download this and see this?
Absolutely, yes. So we will share a link to download the report from sequoia.com, as well as if listening or watching a webinar is more your strategy for consuming information, we also have a link to the recording of a webinar where we reviewed the findings.
Terrific. All right, we'll make sure to put that
Great.
in the program notes so that our listeners out there can access this and contact you guys if they're in need of wellness program strategies, which I think many are. So we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to next year's trend results. All right.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you all
Shannon.
for having
Thank
me.
you, everybody.
Thank you, Shannon.